Hello everyone, I am Gebatron, and here are some tips for commanders who are looking to get that slight edge over the competition.
What'd he say his name was?
Gebatron. So in no particular order, here we go. Player names versus squad names.
King Squad, I'm going to need you to build a garrison where you're at. Easy Squad, you're right there as well.
Communication is of utmost importance in leadership roles, so we need to make it quick and easy for other people to gather additional information from what we're saying, other than just what we're saying. I know that sounds confusing, but hear me out. One way we can do this is by using squad names instead of player names when issuing orders. You have to put yourself in the shoes of other squad leaders. Let's pretend we are Able Squad and the commander just told Baker Squad to place a garrison on their location. I can open my map and easily locate Baker Squad and see that they will be placing a garrison within 200 meters of where I was about to place one. Now we can use this knowledge to either intervene or suggest a different plan or whatever, and all that can be done quickly and easily because my commander used a squad name over a player name. If the commander had used a player name, I may have disregarded it, or at the very least it would have taken more time and effort to locate that player. I could also ask in command chat, but now I'm clogging up command chat with information that could have already been known. Using squad names as the commander will help your officers infer more information by making it easier for them to identify what's going on. And now before I hear it from you guys down in the comments, there are going to be times when you have to use a specific player's name to get their attention. Sometimes squad leaders aren't even aware of what squads they're leading, so using a player name is helpful in that regard. But once you have their attention and they are made aware of their squad name, using those squad names is more effective and efficient for the team as a whole. And just to tack on here, squad leaders always know what squad you're leading. For more tips on communicating in Hell Let Loose, check the top right and watch that video after this one. Use your marks wisely. Sticking with forms of communication, let's talk about marks. The commander has many marks, but they can only place one of each type at a time, so we don't want to be redundant with our marks. A quick example would be if there are multiple pieces of enemy armor on the field, instead of trying to mark all of them with inappropriate marks, simply pick the one that is your priority, the one that is directly impeding your most immediate goal. A more in-depth example being, let's say we have to take the chapel here on Utah Beach. Now everybody already knows that the chapel strong point is the end objective, and they already know, or should know, that we need to defend Sunken Bridge, so placing our attack and defend marks here is redundant. There are a couple of important areas you typically need to control to begin to break down the enemy's hold on Chapel. One is this canal that leads into it from the west, and another is this building here to the north. Both of these areas are key avenues into and around the chapel, so instead of placing your attack mark on the chapel, place it on these other important areas to help direct your squad leaders. Same with defense. Help direct your squad leaders with defend marks on important areas around your strong point, where you suspect enemy activity or where your garrisons are indicating enemy activity in your territory. But always remember to add verbal context to your marks. Never place one without telling your squads why it's there or what you want done about it. Bonus tip here is that if you get a squad to respond to your marks, have them replace it with their own so you can use your marks to direct other squads for yet unassigned tasks. Avoid map clutter. This one is really simple. You want to avoid map clutter whenever possible. It's one of the reasons it's a good idea to remove your marks once a squad leader has replaced them with their own. But this also goes for commander orders. Some commander orders this is impossible, such as supply drop, precision strike, ammo drop, etc. Those all have to be placed exactly where you want them to go. But there are some orders where this is not the case. The two I'm talking about specifically are reinforce and the recon plane. I see a lot of commanders place the reinforce order directly onto the strong point. This is unnecessary as the order can be placed anywhere in the active sector. Placing it outside of the strong point will keep that area visually clear so players can still see things like marks or any blips from flares, recon elements, whatever. Speaking of recon, I see this a lot too. Commanders will place their recon plane order right where they want to detect enemies. This also just makes it more difficult to see. The recon plane will detect anything in its path, so there is no need to place the recon plane icon directly over important areas. So instead of this, do this. Urban versus non-urban areas for support. It is important to understand how different areas will affect your air support. In this case, how some of your air assets will be less effective in urban areas. For one, players are able to hide from recon planes. Learn more about that at the top right. But dense urban areas means more players will be in buildings. This means that the intel your recon plane is providing will be less accurate than it is in non-urban areas. Better to use flares or recon vehicles in these areas as players cannot hide from them. Should they be able to hide from them? That's a topic for a different video. It also means that your bombing runs in these areas will be less effective, let alone strafing runs. Just make sure you are factoring this information in when deciding whether or not to use these assets in these areas. Use recon planes to find where they aren't. Since we now know that recon planes aren't as effective in urban areas, we can talk about using them in a different way. Commanders always call these in because they are trying to find the enemy, usually to make sure their bombing runs are effective and to give their squad leaders a good idea of where the enemy spawns may be, etc. But every recon plane will also show where the enemy is not at. These can be weak points in the enemy's defensive lines that could, and often should, be exploited. Make sure you are gathering both types of information from your recon plane runs, and don't be afraid to use them in this manner if you already have a good idea of where the enemy is, but are having a hard time finding weak spots to break through. Plane angles and times. This one has two parts. Part A, let's talk about angles, specifically in regards to precision strike. This can be applied to your bombing runs and strafing runs too, but the German Stuka is a dive bomber. This means it drops its payload at an almost entirely vertical angle, no matter which direction you call it in from. This means it's effective in urban areas, even in tight streets, as seen here. Interesting to note is that the Stuka actually drops its bomb from the opposite direction you call it in from, but it's almost completely irrelevant as it drops straight down. The same cannot be said for the US and Soviet precision strikes, as they are not dive bombers, but rather they launch rockets from a much more horizontal angle. This makes them much less effective in urban areas, as they will often hit buildings before they hit your targets. If you need to use a precision strike in an urban area as the US or Soviets, be extra careful of the angle you call it in from to avoid being wasteful and ineffective. Don't be afraid to ask your squad leaders what direction it needs to come from. Part B, dealing with angles, is specific to the recon plane. All of the other air support call-ins come in at the same times no matter where you call them in at. For instance, an air supply drop takes 1 minute 10 seconds to hit the ground no matter on the map where you put it. Strafing runs will hit the ground in 10 seconds no matter where you place it. Same with bombing runs, etc. All of these types of air support simply spawn where they need to. The recon plane is different insofar as it comes from off-map and travels through the map. That means we have to take into account time to target. Let me show you what I mean. If we want a recon above N30 highway going straight across the map, we can either call our plane in from the west or the east. If we call it in from the east, so a westbound route, the long way, it will take our recon plane a long time to get there. It will also be traveling over ground where enemies could be. These enemies could tip off their teammates that a recon plane is coming, leading some of them to hide, affecting the accuracy of our intel. If we call the plane in from this short side, from the west heading eastbound, then the enemy will have less of a chance to react to our plane. I see this a lot when commanders are trying to look at two strong points. So instead of calling your plane in like this, consider calling it in like this to get better intel in these more immediate areas. Sometimes you won't have a choice like with the center strong points, as it will take a long time no matter what direction you call them in from. But even still, calling them in from the friendly area means less chance they'll get spotted early by the enemy. Now, will this tip change the tide of a match? Of course not, but it will help you get more accurate intel more often. Dropping supplies early and often. A specific meta has formed as the result of the supply trucks not being able to drop supplies in the first zone, or first two grid squares. As a result, engineers will often drive their trucks to this border, drop their supplies right on the other side, and then build their nodes back in the HQ zone. This makes node placement very easy for enemy recon to find. It also leads to engineers fighting officers for those early supply trucks, which could arguably be better used to build early game garrisons. Something I like to do is instruct my officers to let their engineers know that I will be dropping supplies by air in the HQ zones as soon as possible.
Squad leaders, let your engineers know that I'll be dropping supplies in the HQ zone, so they don't need to worry about trucks right now.
So this fight for trucks is avoided and nodes can be built in less predictable spots. Of course, it's nice if engineers and support players work together to help in this regard, but you can wish in one hand and drop supplies in the other and see which one fills up faster. After all of this, your resource income should be high enough that you can start dropping supplies liberally. While immediate concerns should take priority, there will be times where you have a supply drop available with no immediate need for one. I like to drop supplies anywhere I think I may need one in the future. Look for areas where a possible offensive garrison could go if you lose territory, anywhere an emergency fallback garrison could go if you find yourself losing territory fast, possible garrisons you'll need if gaining territory. You'll never regret having too many supplies on the field. Secure area drops. If you're dropping plenty of supplies often all over the map, then you won't be able to secure all these areas. But what about those supply drops that are more immediate? A mistake I see a lot of commanders make is dropping supplies in areas where garrisons are needed urgently before there is a friendly presence in that area. Remember, the enemies can see your airdrops too, and it can tip the enemy off to your intentions. If you drop supplies in an area where you have no presence, then you really don't know if your squads will be able to make it there before the enemy does. What I like to do is wait to drop these vital supplies into these areas until I have some friendly soldiers there that can secure the area and defend the drop from any enemies that may be coming to destroy it. This practice will greatly increase the success rate of getting these important garrisons built. It can also have the added benefit of having the officer let you know exactly where they want the drop so they can hide it and place the best possible garrison. Another tip to tack on here, don't drop supplies on friendly units in enemy territory without talking to them first. Your drop could give them away, and they might already have other plans to build a garrison, or they may not want to build it in their current location. Just talk to them first. Stay mobile. No, I don't mean redeploying everywhere. I mean using a vehicle. While building garrisons is the responsibility of all officers, using a vehicle will help you traverse the map much faster than redeploying as you chase your supply drops from point A to point B. Another benefit of using vehicles is that you'll be able to ferry other officers or troops to areas where you need a presence quickly. I think Jeeps are really good command vehicles as they are fast and have a lower profile, but a supply truck will help you build without drops with the added benefit of being able to deliver supplies wherever needed. Transport trucks will allow you to move whole squads at a time, and half tracks will give you a mobile spawn and some armor protection. Vehicles are great tools, so make sure you are using them to benefit your team. Coordinate bombing runs and Katyusha strikes. There are two schools of thought when it comes to bombing runs and Katyusha strikes. Some people think these orders should be used whenever available to get the max number of orders per match, and others think they should be used when conditions are favorable. I agree with the latter of these two ideas. As such, my tip here is pretty simple. Try not to use these orders unless you have a plan to follow them up with some sort of action, usually an assault. A bombing run on a point like this may get you some kills, but with no squads in position to capitalize on those kills, you really haven't gained anything. However, a situation like this is much more favorable. Here we have squads in position to take this ground away from the enemy after our run goes through. And don't just assume that your squad leaders will know and recognize this on their own. Just like with your marks, never call in any orders without giving your officers context. Simply say, bombing run coming in over strong point. Push in once it goes through and let's take this point, or something like that, so they can spread the word and coordinate with their squads. Katyusha strikes are a little different as they are less precise and have a shorter cooldown, so sometimes I will use them just to free up movement for my squads, as they do a good job at keeping the enemy's heads down for a short bit, but I still always try to coordinate that movement. Bonus tip here in regards to communicating your orders. I always announce my orders over command chat.
Alright guys, we're going to have a bombing run coming through train station here, guys. Get ready to move in.
maybe not all supply drops and vehicle spawns, but all recon planes, bombing runs, reinforced ammo drops. You gotta let your officers know what you are doing so they can plan to take advantage of the conditions you are helping to shape on the battlefield. Here's a bonus tip. Watch my commander videos. A little self-promotion here, but I have made detailed guides on how all of the commander orders work, which is priority number 1 when commanding. I've also made a gameplay plus commentary guide where I play a full match as commander. In that one specifically, I talk about how I play the role and what works well for me, as well as cover approaches that I have seen other successful commanders use. I also talk about the mistakes I make so you don't have to make them yourself. Remember that when it comes to leadership, there is no right or wrong way, as everyone will have a unique skill set. But by learning from other players, we can expand on and hone our skill sets, making us better hell let loose players. I'll put a command playlist in the end screen. And super bonus tips for those of you who are watching until the end. A couple final notes here with some information that was shared with me by my Discord friend Neskio. Be mindful when calling Katyusha strikes in on hills, as you'll have uneven impact distribution, meaning more rockets will hit the center part of your designated area than will make it over the hill, like in this example where maybe only 4 impacts make it over the crest of the hill. Second is that the bombing run indicator isn't perfectly accurate. Here you can see we place our marks exactly where the run is indicated, but the run actually starts before that mark. Hard to tell exactly, but it looks to be about 10 or 15 meters early, and it stops 10 or 15 meters short. So depending on what you're trying to hit, you may want to keep this in mind when placing bombing runs. Make sure to give Neskio some love down in the comments for pointing these out. Thanks a bunch, Neskio. Alright, I hope you guys learned something new or got some fresh perspective. Please put your commander tips down in the comments, as we're all trying to learn and improve our game here. Leave a like, share, subscribe for more. Consider clicking that join button to become a member to get special perks, including early access to videos. As always, thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.
Excellent work, guys.
You too, command.